Welcome to our meeting this evening. Particular welcome to my fellow administrators, Karen Douglas and Hugh Delahunty, to our CEO and our general managers, and a very good evening, of course, to all who may have joined us this evening through our live stream. It is good to have everybody here as part of our meeting. I'm going to read through the meeting procedures as part of this remote meeting, and to make sure that everybody understands how the meeting is to be conducted. Recent amendments to the Local Government Act enabled remote meetings to be held in this way, and this enables Council to continue to meet and conduct business safely during the current pandemic restrictions. Consistent with the guidelines provided by the Victorian State Government, we are live streaming tonight's Council meeting using a system that complies with the Victorian Government's advice on minimising risk to cybersecurity. We will operate tonight with revised meeting procedures that are consistent with the intent of our local law that governs the way that Council meets and conducts its business. These procedures were adopted at our Council meeting on the 16th of May and are available on Council's website. As administrators, we're able to see and hear each other, and our community is able to hear and see the meeting. Now, if technical problems do occur during this meeting that disrupts the conduct of the meeting, or if any of our administrators is not able to fully participate, the meeting will be adjourned until the technical issues can be resolved, or reschedule the meeting until a future date if it can't be resolved. If I drop out, or if I drop out, the administrator, Karen Douglas, will become the chair, or if two or all of us drop out, the meeting will be automatically adjourned, or adjourned by the remaining administrator for up to half an hour. And if the problem can't be fixed, the remaining items will be held over until the next ordinary meeting or another meeting called for that purpose. Now, if anybody's watching on live stream, we certainly have had some connectivity problems with Administrator Douglas this afternoon, and so she's, I think we've got that sorted. So whilst the pitch is not particularly good, she's able to see and hear and participate fully in the meeting. I should also acknowledge that the meeting is being handled and organised by our Manager of Governance, Property and Risk, and our Manager of Business Transformation. And thank you to you both for enabling this meeting to occur. Okay. At the commencement of all our regular meetings, we normally acknowledge that we meet on Dja Dja Wurrung country. Tonight's meeting participants, we are located around the country on a number of different traditional lands. We have the Dja Dja Wurrung, the Wathaurong, Tanarung, Jabajali, and the Jabberung peoples. And if you're watching from home, you may well be located on the lands of another traditional group. So tonight we acknowledge the traditional owners across the country. We pay our respects to leaders past, present, and emerging, recognising that they hold the memories, traditions, cultures and hopes of all Indigenous peoples. Our hope is that we might walk together in harmony in a spirit of healing and cooperation. And we're going to, I'm going to read the opening prayer, and that is, Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon this council. We ask that you direct and guide our work to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the Central Goldfields Shire. Okay, well, we'll get into the business of tonight's meeting. As everybody is present, we don't have any apologies this evening. So there are obviously no leave of absence either. Does anybody have a conflict of interest they need to declare?
No.
No. Okay, there are no conflicts of interest to declare. So we'll move on then to item number 5 on our agenda, which is the minutes of the previous council meeting, which is found on page 2. I'll just bring it up. Oh, wrong one. Go.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the council confirms the minutes of the council meeting held on the 23rd of June 2020.
Thank you very much. I have a seconder.
I'll second that.
Been seconded, been moved and seconded. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. Thank you. Moving then on to item number 6 of our agenda, which is the Reports on our committees. We have a report from the Denali Historic Precincts Committee. And again, it was back on the 24th of February. And again, I make the explanation as I have in the past. These meetings, these minutes actually come to council once they have been approved by the various committees. So there can sometimes be a long delay, particularly if and I imagine it's the case in this instance, where the committee only meets quarterly. So it takes almost 6 months before the minutes actually finally get to us. But we have received the minutes of that meeting, and the recommendation in relation to this matter is found on page 5 of the agenda. So,
and I will move the council notes the confirmed minutes of the Denali Historic Precinct Committee meeting 24th February 2020.
thank you. And Mr. Delahunty, you'll second that?
Second that, Mr. Chairman.
This has been moved and been second. I'm going to put it to the vote. Those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and against, that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 7 on the agenda, which is petitions. We do not have any. So the next item then is we're into the officer reports, which is item number 8. And there's a number of reports we're dealing with this evening. The first one is the Assembly of Councillors. That there's a report there on a number of meetings that have been held, and the recommendation in relation to this matter is found on page 8.
And I will move the council note the record of assemblies of councillors for the period 17th of June 2020 to 17th of July 2020.
Okay, it's been moved. Do we have a second? Yes, it's been moved and seconded. Thank you very much for that. Do you wish to say anything in relation to these, Mrs. Douglas?
No, it's self-explanatory.
Okay, it is indeed. I'm going to put it to the vote then. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to some more exciting matters for this evening's meeting, which is the first one is item 8.2, which is our priority projects plan for 2021. And this is an advocacy document that council has been utilising quite successfully in the past. So I'm just going to ask our chief executive if you'd like to say a few words by way of introduction to her report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The priority projects document has been updated for 2 really important reasons. One, because the previous document had been so successful in attracting a number of grants, and you see in the budget that we have got a $15.9 million capital works program. Many of those projects were identified in the initial priority projects plan, and by using that as an advocacy document with both state and federal government, we were able to attract investment in a number of those key projects. Moving forward, we have undertaken a significant amount of strategic work over the last 18 months, including the economic development and tourism strategy, the recreational open space strategy that will be coming to council shortly. And through that consultation with the community, we've identified a number of other projects that are obviously priorities for the community. So producing the updated priority projects plan means that we will be able to, again, have conversations with both state and federal government about the priorities for the Central Goldfields Shire community and hopefully attract further investment in our Shire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now the report is there, and I'm just going to bring up the yes, the recommendation is there on page 11. I'm going to ask for a mover of that report or for those recommendations.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the council adopt. Sorry, I'd like to move the council adopt the priority projects plan and endorse its use as an advocacy document when seeking funding support from other levels of government.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Mrs. Douglas, you prepared to second that?
Happy. Very happy to support
I'm
that.
happy for open from Mr. Delahunty. Do you want to make some comments in relation to this matter?
Look, the Chief Executive Officer very truthfully told the story that when we arrived, we come up with this priority projects plan, and this is the latest one, which I've got here in front of me. But again, it has been very helpful for our Shire to gain funding from both the state and federal government for the priority projects we identified when we arrived. But we need to update that because times have moved on, and this will assist in our advocacy program as we go forward, not only for us as administrators, but also for the incoming council. The projects that we identified in the previous plan were very, very effective in gaining dollars for our community and dollars for projects that we are implementing at this stage. But we need to move on and identify the next tranche of projects that we'd like support for. So this document, we've got 9 projects listed there, including the Mirabar Railway Station activation. We've also got wastewater for growing Talbot. We've also got a developing pathway network. This is not only for walking, but also for cycling, and also one such as the Central Goldfields Youth Hub. And there is another 5 projects there. But again, it is a very well-researched document, as the Chief Executive has already highlighted. It links in with our council plan. It also links in with our draft budget we've got out for consultation at the moment, but it is a very good tool to assist us in advocating for the community. We will talk to federal governments, federal and state governments, but also to our local, state and federal members, because they will also play an advocacy role on behalf of the Central Goldfields Shire. So well done to the staff and the community for helping us to identify and put on paper our 9 projects which are listed under the priority projects plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Douglas, do you wish to make any comments?
Really, I just reinforce Councillor or Administrator Mr. Delahunty's comments. I mean, I think we found that having a similar document previously, and particularly in the current climate when governments are looking to stimulate jobs and employment through local government, I think having that priority document with things that are really argued well for the need, the work's been done, the background work has been done. I did like also the fact that it sort of covers a range of portfolios. So I think that that's probably a strategic thing to keep in mind when you're, asking for support for various projects in your community. You would probably need to spread them over a few portfolios. I think this is probably a smart move. And so I just am delighted, because I really do think this is, the first document was very well received by our members, our state and the federal member as well. And I think it gave them some substantial bargaining point to start advocating on our behalf, because a lot of the grants that we've been fortunate enough to have coming through are things that we do really want and have advocated to get. So sometimes that doesn't always happen. So I think this is tremendous. So well done to the staff. It's an improvement on the first one, and I'm sure it'll be very successful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And I'll make a couple of comments before we put it to the vote. I think when we first arrived here, we were only a few months out from a state election, and we were somewhat dismayed to find that there was no documentation of any projects that we could actually use to seek funding at that time as part of election commitments in the state election. Now, councils would generally have a drawer full of projects that they would pull out whenever a visiting minister or government representative would arrive, and you'd have a project you could pull out of the drawer and drop on the table to do a bit of lobbying to get some funding. We didn't have any of those when we arrived here. And we sought very quickly the assistance of a specialist consulting firm that helped us pull together a bundle of projects that we were able to use for that purpose. Now, I have to say, we have been highly successful. It was a the consultants that we engaged did an extraordinarily good job in a very short space of time. And we've had enormous success with a range of projects that I think almost all have been funded bar one, which has moved now across to our next round of projects. I think as we head into a new council election, it's a great time to be adopting a project plan such as this. And of course, it picks up in what's in our current council plan, but also within council's budget. There is no doubt that councils need to be ready at this particular time to take advantage of the projects that the state government is looking for, projects that are planned, sufficiently planned, that can be activated very quickly. And I think already some of the projects that we've got in this plan, we've been able to attract some funding and support for because they were ready, and the planning that we have done over the last couple of years has well and truly paid off. So the report, as the report tonight indicates, the document that we are adopting captures the key priority projects that are sufficiently planned and ready for state or federal government support when those opportunities come around. Now, Mr. Delahunty did identify some of those documents, and for the sake of those people who may be watching that don't have the document in front of you, there are 9 priority projects in the document that we are dealing with this evening. The first one is the Mirabar Railway Precinct activation. The Carisbrook levy, of course, is on that list. The wastewater for a growing Talbot, one that community has talked to us about an awful lot since we've been here. Developing a pathway network, and as Mr. Delahunty pointed out, it's not just for footpaths, this is about shared pathways throughout the Shire. The upgrade to the art gallery, we were very, very successful in getting $500,000 from the state government to do stage 1. So stage 2 and 3 are part of our projects in this current round. The Rec Reserve, stage 2 out at Carisbrook, the Delidio Recreation Reserve at Denali, the Mirabar Splash Park. I know there's lots of families out there that will be very excited about that one because it was one that has been raised with us a number of times since we've been here. That is on the list, as is the Central Goldfields Youth Hub. And that, of course, was one that has been around for quite some time, and we are still seeking funding for that project. But we have done a lot of work so that we are now ready to go to work on that one should the opportunity arise. As I say, each one of the projects has now received sufficient planning to enable us to say that we are shovel ready with any of these projects should any government decide they want to support us. As I said before, this is a critical advocacy tool, not just for our federal and state members of parliament and so on, but I think it's also one for other government organisations, for regional organisations, and even the private sector who may want to come on and sponsor some of these projects and support some of these projects in the local community. It's a great tool, and I'm absolutely delighted that we are adopting this evening, and we'll be handing this on to an incoming government later on this year who will be able to hit the ground running and have all the documentation that we missed so much when we arrived. And so they will be able to take this and really drive it into the future. So I commend this document. And again, to Madam CEO, I commend your staff on a great job pulling this together. It's a great document, and it will be available, I'm sure, on Council's website after it's been adopted this evening. And I urge the community, because I think it's a great way that we can help the community understand what are the projects that the council's working on, and I think that's a really good thing for the community to know that as well. So it has been moved that council adopt the priority projects plan and endorse its use as an advocacy document when seeking funding support from other levels of government. So I'm going to put that motion to the vote. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Right. Against, that's carried. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to item 8.3, which is the instrument of delegation for Council's Chief Executive. Report is there on page 12 of the Council report. The recommendation is on page 14.
And I will move the recommendation. In the exercise of the power conferred by Section 11(1)(b) of the Local Government Act 2020, Council resolves that 1, there be delegated to the person holding a position or acting in or performing the duties of Chief Executive Officer the powers, duties and functions set out in the attached instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer, subject to the conditions and limitations specified in that instrument. 2, on the coming into force of the instrument, all previous delegations to the Chief Executive Officer are revoked. 3, the duties and functions set out in the instrument must be performed and the powers set out in the instrument must be executed in accordance with any guidelines or policies of council that it may from time to time adopt.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Delahunty, are you happy to second that motion?
Happy to second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Douglas, do you wish to make any comments in relation to this one?
Well, I think it's a very important delegation, a very important document to have. Of course, we had one, but this is one of the many actions that are the result of the new Local Government Act. It doesn't in any way change the powers and the restrictions, but there are a list now included of things that are not to be delegated. And quickly I'll go through them. That's appointing an acting Chief Executive Officer for a period exceeding 28 days, the election of a mayor or deputy mayor, the granting of a reasonable request for leave under Section 35 of the Act, making any decision in relation to the employment, dismissal or removal of the Chief Executive Officer, adoption or amendment of any policy that Council is required to adopt under the Act, adoption or amendment of the government rules, borrowing money, and subject to Section 181H1B of the Local Government Act 1989, declaring general rates, municipal charges, service rates and charges, and specified rates and charges. So these have been now included, but as I said, there is no change. It's the same powers and restrictions as we already had in our other delegations.
Okay, we seem to have lost our chief executive.
Oh,
I don't think our meeting rules that we adopted actually covers that one, but I don't think it has any impact on the conduct of the meeting, as far as I'd be aware. So we will continue on, and I'm sure she will rejoin us just as soon as possible. Mr. Delahunty, do you wish to make any comments?
Oh, look, Administrator Douglas covered it all, but under the Act, we must have this in place by the 1st of September, and it will ensure the smooth running of council into the future. So I'm supportive of this instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just very, very briefly, to some people, this might, after sort of what we've just been talking about and all the exciting projects, it's quite possible that some people would see this as a rather dry and boring matter. And I guess in some respects, they're probably right, but it is still important, as already been said, to ensure the smooth functioning of the council. Just in word, by way of explanation, I've just been given some instructions that says that we can continue with the meeting. We're quite legal to do that. So thank you, Megan, for letting me know that. I should have had my phone on, and I because I'm getting messages through. Yes, Lucy, our chief executive, is having connection issues, so I'm sure she will join us. And I've been advised that we are perfectly okay to continue to proceed with the meeting. I was just about to explain that councils have always delegated some of its more routine powers to the chief executive. And it's all part of making sure that the organisation can run smoothly, and matters that are routine matters of council are not held up to any great degree. Now, there was, as Administrator Douglas has pointed out, we are constrained by the new Act, and there are some requirements under the Act which required some modification to our instrument of delegation. So this evening we are simply considering an update to the delegations that currently exist to make sure that we actually are in accordance with the new Local Government Act. There's a couple of matters tonight that as a result of changes to the Act, and we are, like all councils, are in the process of updating and making changes within the organisations to make sure that we comply and we implement that Act. So that's what this one is all about this evening. So we have a motion. I'm not going to read it out again. It's a fairly extensive motion. It is on page 14 of the council agenda if you're following our agenda this evening. So I'm going to put the motion. Those in favour of the motion say aye, please. And aye. Against, that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 8.4. Just bring it up on my screen. This is the annual community satisfaction survey and report that has been prepared by the Chief Executive Officer, which summarises and outlines the outcomes of the community satisfaction survey.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that council note the results of the community satisfaction survey of 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have a seconder.
Yes, I'll second that.
Been seconded. Okay, Mr. Delahunty, do you wish to make any comments on this one?
Just some brief comments, Mr. Chairman. Look, the community satisfaction surveys are done annually to measure the number of KPIs that are identified right across the council services that we provide. The report we've been given tonight outlines many of the key findings of that report. It also highlights that council has largely consolidated its significant gains in 2019, but there are some areas where we've got some work to do. And I think that's important. We take up those challenges and work on those for the future. But council's performance is rated significantly better than most small rural councils across Victoria. So that's a good indicator. And also from a statewide averages point of view, we've done very well. And I want to really commend particularly the work done in the public areas and also our work by our council staff at the front counter. They are really the front of our council. They get all the phone calls, the letters and all those things coming through those great working people there. So they got a good ranking, and look, the report goes for 40 or 50 pages. There's a lot in the report, but again, I think we should be proud of the work that our staff have done. We've got some areas to improve on, but overall, I think it's a good report going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Douglas, do you wish to make any comments?
Not really, except that I would say there are, I think, 400 people that were interviewed across the Shire. And I was fascinated by the way that they actually tried to replicate the demographic profile of the Shire with those people. So it's a very interesting read, I think. And I'd encourage particularly the new councillors. I think they will probably get quite a lot out of it. And also it's possibly more based around trends and things like that. So we had a rather vibrant result last year, and we would have loved to have replicated that, but we have actually consolidated that as well. So I think all things considered, an interesting document. I've read it right through, but then I'm a bit fascinated with those sorts of results. So thank you, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll make a few comments. I can't help myself on this one. It's this is an annual survey, as has already been pointed out. And whilst it's not mandatory, I think it's a good thing for councils to be involved in. And whilst certainly from my point of view, it does have some significant limitations, it is really quite a cost-effective way for councils to hear and gather a range of information from across the broad section of the community. This was the 21st year of the survey, and so it has become quite a useful document, if you like, or useful way to pick up some trends and identify how things are trending within council. And I think that's a really important opportunity for us. Now, whilst some of the methodology has changed, it does have some inconsistencies throughout that 21-year period, obviously. It is still a very, very useful tool for councils to measure our performance and gauge how we are trending. Last year, the independent surveys said that the improvement in the performance of the Central Goldfield Shire was the most significant improvement seen in the state over the 20 years of that survey. And understandably, we were pretty chuffed about that, I'd have to say. We were very, very pleased and very proud of that. I should point out, though, that massive improvement of last year, that record-breaking improvement of last year, really only got us back to the average. I think that's a clear statement of where we were as an organisation prior to last year. Now, of course, we would love to have continued that trend, that record-breaking trend, but of course that was never a realistic expectation. But it is worth pointing out that all the measures remain above the 2018 result, which was at the end of a steady period of decline in the Central Goldfield Shire. I think it was the previous 3 years, the performance of the council had been declining. This year, even though it's not quite the same record-breaking performance of last year, we are still well above that lowest point. Having said that, as Mr. Delahunty has pointed out, and the comments in the survey itself said that we have actually consolidated the significance that we made last year, and that's encouraging that we've been able to do that. Of course, we acknowledge that there has been a significant decline, particularly in areas like waste management and community consultation and lobbying. But generally speaking, the areas of decline were consistent right across Victoria, so we're not a standout council in that regard. The survey recommends that council continues to focus on maintaining and improving the performance in service areas that most influence the perceptions of our performance. And of course, we will continue to do that. I have to say, and I'll be quite honest about this, I was a little surprised, and I think we were all surprised about the rating of our, in regards to our community consultation. And that our performance in that regard declined in this survey. And we have certainly taken that feedback on board and will continue to do so. A deeper analysis, I think, of this area may provide some explanations for that result. And we will continue to undertake the workshops, the forums, the surveys, and working groups to develop council's policies, council initiatives and council's plans going forward. And our community engagement and consultation will continue. And we will continue to do our best to improve that and continue to work to make sure that the community understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we will continue to consult with the community in any way that we can. We do have a very comprehensive community consultation framework, which we will continue to use. And this will become particularly important early next year when the new council develops its council plan in the future. I guess from our perspective, as this will be the last satisfaction survey that we will be overseeing as administrators, I guess from as I see it, I think it's a very strong endorsement of the work that we have done and the challenging task that we on when we arrived here 3 years ago. So whilst it wasn't another record-breaking year, I think it's something which we, and certainly I, remain very, very proud of going forward. And I commend all council staff for the amazing work they have done under very, very difficult circumstances over the last 2 years. And I congratulate everybody for that work. So it has been moved and it has been seconded that council note the results of the Community Satisfaction Survey 2020. So I'm going to put that to the vote. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you. I just got a note there to say my connection is unstable, so I hope it will just hang on for a few more minutes till we get to the end of the meeting. Moving on now to item 8.5, which is our audit and charter. Looking at page of the agenda, the recommendation we are dealing with is on page 21.
I will move the recommendation on page 21.
Thank you.
That council establish an audit and risk committee in accordance with section 53 of the Local Government Act 2020 to approve the attached draft audit and risk committee charter in accordance with section 54 of the Local Government Act 2020, and 3, reconfirm the membership of the Audit and Risk Committee as resolved at its meeting on the 28th of April 2020 as follows: to appoint John Watson to be the independent member and the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee for a further term of 3 years, ending on the 23rd of May 2023. B, appoint Robert Tomasini to be an independent member of the Audit and Risk Committee for a further term of 2 years, ending on the 23rd of May 2022. C, appoint Cheryl Fitzgerald to be an independent member of the Audit and Risk Committee for a further term of 1 year, ending on the 23rd of May 2021. And appoint administrators Hugh Delahunty and Karen Douglas to the Audit and Risk Committee for the remainder of their term as administrators of the Central Goldfields Shire Council.
Happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. Be moved. I have a seconder.
Happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Be seconded. Now that was I don't know whether everybody could hear that. It was a little bit shaky from my end, whether it was my connection or whether it was at the Mrs. Douglas's end. I think it might be up her end. But anyway, I hope could everybody hear what she was reading out?
Through Chair, we could hear.
Yeah, okay, yes. That's the as long as people could hear that, that's the main thing. So it's been moved and seconded. Now, do you wish to make any comments on that one, Mrs. Douglas?
I need to briefly state this is one of the other actions probably that's come out of the new Local Government Act. We already did have this in place, and we did bring the appointments to the Audit and Risk Committee to Council only a month or so ago. So I don't think there's really anything more explanation, and in view of the tenuous connections, I'll leave it, I think, at that.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Delahunty, did you wish to say anything?
No, I think it's all it. I encourage people to read the report. It's very extensive.
Mr. Delahunty, did you wish to say anything?
Yes, I do. I'm happy to support it.
Okay. Okay, we're getting very, very shaky here, so we will press on and hopefully we'll get to the end of the meeting. So it has been moved and seconded. I just would, one other point I would like to make, that this is about, as Administrator Douglas has said, this is about complying with the new Local Government Act, and there's a lot of work being done to implement that act, and I commend our staff for the work that are being done in that space. But I think it's an indication, though, too, that we're just not interested in just complying. It's good practice to sometimes go a little bit further than just the minimum. And in this regard, we do that with our Audit and Risk Committee members who do complete a personal interest return as part of their membership of that Audit and Risk Committee, which is something that is not formally required of them to do. So we are really committed to making sure that we do our utmost to be best practice in this regard. It's been, and again, in the interest of a very shaky situation we find ourselves in, I'm not going to say any more. So I'm going to put it to the vote. I might just ask you to raise your hands as part of your voting in this, so we make sure we get it right. So those in favour say aye and raise your hands, please.
Aye.
Yep, I got that. We're all a very clear vote in favour. I'll declare the motion carried. Thank you very much for that one. So that concludes item 8 of our officer reports. There is item 9 is the next item on our agenda, which is the use of the common seal. There is nothing listed there. There are no notices of motion to be considered this evening. There is no urgent business or confidential business that we need to receive this evening. So on that note, it is 6:37. And I'm going to declare the meeting closed. And in doing so, thank you for your patience. Thank you for those who've been watching online. If you haven't been able to pick up all of what's been going on this evening, I encourage you to go to Council's website, because a recording of tonight's meeting will be on the website in the coming days. So I really thank you for your attendance and declare the meeting closed. Thank you all.